Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of All Sports Now. My name is Cory Sparks, your main host, and this is a podcast where we cover a variety of sports with a variety of guest hosts and do all things possible to keep you entertained. Make sure that you follow our socials to get sports and podcast updates on a daily basis if you have not already. That's at all.sportsnow on Instagram, at allsportsnowpod on Twitter, and all sports now, all three separate words with spaces in between, on YouTube. Then make sure you go over and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or follow us on Spotify. Speaking of social media, when you are on our accounts, make sure you check out our latest announcement about the partnership that we just finalized with an esports team called Notion Gaming. Really exciting partnership that I'm excited to kick off this week and hopefully for a very long time. You can expect a lot of fun content coming up with me playing with and against professional gamers on games like Madden, 2K, FIFA, Rocket League, Call of Duty, other combat games as well. We have a lot of really fun collaborations coming up, mostly on YouTube, but I'll be putting it up on all social media platforms, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Lots of exciting things happening here, guys. Today's a different kind of episode. I will be the host, and all of you, the audience, will be my co-hosts. So this episode is an Ask Cory episode. A week ago, I asked all of you to send questions regarding anything about sports, and I promised that I would dedicate this episode to giving you all thorough answers. So without further ado, we have questions about the NFL draft, thoughts on the Chicago Cubs' current performance this season, and how Justin Fields will transition into the NFL, and much more right here on All Sports Now.
Try to work the ball in the boundary. Tatum steps into it. Pass is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win it! Cubs have finally won it all! 8-7-10. Will go! Rebound Bosch. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode number 21 of the podcast. This is the Ask Cory episode, and before we get going, it is time for the general sports updates that we do every episode in order to keep everybody in the loop. So first off, the 2021 NFL Draft took place from April 29th to May 1st, with only a fraction of the players showing up in person, while the remainder watched remotely. The NFL preseason will start on August 6th at 2 p.m., where the Cowboys and the Steelers will face off for the annual Hall of Fame game. Quarterback Tim Tebow is going to the Jacksonville Jaguars as a tight end, and he has not played in a little over 8 years. The current 53-year-old will attempt to show out in training camp and preseason in order to make the 53-man roster, which will be determined towards the end of preseason in about 3 months. NBA play-in games between the 7, 8, 9, and 10 seeds will commence starting tomorrow. As a reminder, the lower seed must beat the higher seed twice before the higher seed can win one game. And then the playoffs will commence with the 8 teams in each conference remaining after that. On to your questions. So the first question I have is from Bailey Laird. He said, what do you think of the NFL draft results? I think the draft was honestly it was fun. It was nice to see a few people actually go in person for once. Last year was super weird with Roger Goodell sitting in his basement on some old chair. You know, the fact that players spend time with their family at the home, because there used to always be a limit on how many family members you could bring to the draft. I was used to that. But just seeing Roger Goodell chill in his basement, I don't know. I didn't want to go in his home. I wanted to go on a big NFL draft stage, you know, as a viewer, obviously from a viewer's perspective, and see how that unfolded. But I think it was a good experience just to be able to kind of see everything go back to normal again. I was on the Davis Sports Feud during the draft, and we were doing a live draft reaction. You know, a lot of really surprising things happened. We saw Penei Sewell fall a few picks, which was not supposed to happen in most projections. Trey Lance get picked up in the 3rd spot, and then we saw the Bears trade all the way up and trade just about everything to get Justin Fields. But it was really thrilling, and they were Eagles fans. Kyle Davis and one of his friends who was on there were, so we got to see them come up and get Devontae Smith. So lots of really fun picks happened this year. I feel like this one was promoted more than most just because of all the quarterback talent with, you know, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Mac Jones, Trey Lance. I could go on and on and on. Kellen Mond was a good pick in the 2nd or 3rd round. Kyle Trask, who ended up going to the Buccaneers. Lots of really exciting picks. Just for the sake of mentioning the NFL draft, I will give a winner and a loser. As much as I want to say the Bears for my winner, I feel like everyone would just like, oh, of course, the Bears fan is going to say the Bears were the winner. But I do love what they did with Justin Fields and Tevin Jenkins. But I'm going to say the winner here is the Ravens for their for their first round pick. Honestly, they have Rashad Bateman of Northwestern. I really like that for the Ravens. A lot of people are saying that Lamar Jackson does not have weapons, and I would mostly agree. They have Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews, which is a couple of people, but beyond that, there's no depth. So they really needed another target for Lamar to look for as he goes through his progressions and learns more about the art of being a quarterback in the NFL. He's a couple years into his career now, but honestly, I like it. Bateman is a 6 foot, 190-pound individual who has a lot of speed, but he's also extremely strong for his size and stature. And I think if he's developed correctly, he could be a number 2 or even a number 1 target. Loser is the Bengals. I mean, I understand how fun of a pick this was, and Joe Burrow was vouching for it. He was telling the entire organization, hey, come on, get me Jamar Chase. And for those of you who don't know who Jamar Chase is, he was Joe Burrow's teammate in LSU in 2019, and he gets drafted by the Bengals. Just don't like the pick. I mean, Joe Burrow is coming off an ACL and PCL tear, both lower leg injuries that really limit your mobility. And the reason he had that is because he was constantly getting chased around by defensive linemen. What does that mean? It means you need a better O-line. Who was on the board at number 5? The Bengals were drafting? Oh, Penei Sewell, an All-American offensive lineman out of Oregon, generational talent, and they passed up on him. He actually fell all the way down the Lions pick at number 7, I believe it was, and I was extremely shocked to see that. They passed up on him. I think we learned a lot about the organization of the Bengals in that they had 2 options. They could give Joe Burrow what he wanted and what he needed. What he wanted was Jamar Chase, his old buddy from college. But they have Tyler Boyd. They have T. Higgins. They have a lot of really good wide receivers. By no means is it amazing, but that was not where their issues were. Their issues were the offensive line. They didn't give him what he needed, and I hope he doesn't get hurt, but if he does, I'm blaming the Bengals organization for what they did in this draft, and they made the wrong decision, in my opinion. Next question I have is from Mark Sparks. He's asking, how are the Cubs doing this year? I didn't expect much from the Cubs, and as a Chicago fan, I'm going to do as much as I can to remove my bias here. But after losing huge bat in Kyle Schwarber, who went over to the Nationals, I believe, and a Cy Young candidate in Yu Darvish after his best year yet, was leading the league in the ERA all the way until the end, although it was an abbreviated season, so take that as you will. I didn't have the highest expectations for this team. Kind of expected them to float. And the Pirates in the NL Central, I'm telling you right now, I wouldn't be shocked if the Cubs end up in 4th. But they're doing okay. They're sticking around 500, which just means they have about as many wins as they have losses. They're kind of floating around. They swept the Dodgers, which came out of nowhere because the Dodgers are, for the most part, at full strength. So that was interesting to watch. But with a very depleted starting rotation, I know they got Jake Arrieta back, but he's not what he used to be 5 years ago when they went to the World Series. They have Zach Davies, who was a decent pickup and had some nice years in Milwaukee. Williams, who was okay in Pittsburgh. We just have a lot of decent guys. And then the bullpen was a huge issue, last year and the year before. Honestly, I think the bullpen's doing great. Craig Kimbrell lights out. His ERA was 0 until a couple of games ago. Chafin is also stepping up, throws some nice heaters and really good off-speed pitches into the dirt that gets a lot of hitters to chase. Chris Bryant's doing fine. He's got 10 home runs and 24 RBIs in 35 games. You're hearing MVP chants at Wrigley Field for the first time in a few years, partially because of COVID and there was no fans last year, but also partially because he just hasn't been performing to that level almost half a decade now, which seems crazy. One thing that this team is really being held back by is their inability to hit people in when runners are on scoring position. When there's runners on second and third, or just second or just third, any runners in scoring position scenario, or just any traffic on the base pads in general, it feels like the Cubs have lost their ability to hit the ball. We're getting a lot of solo homers and good things like that, but even up until a couple of weeks ago, this team was scoring 2 or 3 runs a game, and at that point, it doesn't matter how much your pitching is outperforming the expectations, and by all means, let me tell you, they are doing good. You can't put up runs on the board, you're not going to win a game. That's not a consistent formula for success. So I think the Cubs are doing this year. I think they're doing well considering what they have. they can compete if they are able to get more bats, in the lineup and able to get more consistent hits. People need to follow Chris Bryant's lead. I think Wilson Contreras needs to step up more. Javi needs to stop swinging at bad pitches, although people have been saying that for years. I think that's just his style. And Rizzo usually has a slump at the beginning of the year, so hopefully he can pan out for the sake of the Cubs over the course of the year, get his batting average up, start to hit some more homers, and really help the heart of this lineup establish themselves again. Next question is from Kathy Bittner. Question is, how will Justin Fields pan out in Chicago? Great question, because I think there's a lot of layers to this one. I honestly think Justin Fields' future in Chicago is completely going to be determined not by his work ethic, because we've already seen that. For anyone who has seen any interviews with Justin Fields, first off, I'd like to say this. I think there was a huge misinterpretation with how he feels about going to Chicago. The dude had this blank stare on his face when he got picked. I think he had this blank stare, though. I think he had the blank stare because he was not supposed to fall all the way to 11. This dude fell and fell and fell and fell. Originally, he was supposed to go to the 49ers, and then Shanahan made it pretty clear that it was going to be between Mac Jones and Trey Lance in terms of who he was going to pick. And he just fell from there. The Bengals don't need a quarterback. The Lions weren't going to go after a quarterback. Dolphins weren't going to go after a quarterback. A lot of other people were going after weapons and protection and Penei Sewell and that type of thing. If you look at Justin Fields, all of a sudden he goes down to 11. Chicago says, we're not going to let him fall to 15 where Bill Belichick could get him. The Patriots ended up getting Mac Jones, which is indicative of the fact that they were looking for a quarterback. So they grabbed Fields. I love the pick for its value. Now, how I think he's going to perform after that long statement prior to me actually getting to this answer, I apologize for that. I think he has the potential to do very well. He is ready, and he is outperforming Andy Dalton, who is currently the number one spot on the depth chart for the Chicago Bears. By all means, start him. He is not ready. And let's say we're 5 or 6 games in, and the Bears are 1-5, 1-4, 0-5, 0-6, wherever we are season. Put Fields in because you're sick of Andy Dalton doing bad. Despite the fact that the Bears have Tevin Jenkins, who I believe will immediately be put into that offensive line, which will now be healthy, and I think will be okay. We saw what happened when there is an immobile quarterback under center, Nick Foles last year. They can't do anything. We couldn't even run it for a while because we saw that the play action was so inefficient. I felt like our offense was just giving up, and it got to the point that even Matt Nagy handed the clipboard over to his offensive coordinator and said, you know what, you do it. I can't do this anymore. So, I think Fields is going to do way better on this team than Andy Dalton because of his potential to be a dual threat quarterback and his mobility in general. Listen, if Andy Dalton's doing bad, don't take Justin Fields out onto the field. The only reason that you should be putting Justin Fields onto the field, pun intended, I guess, is if he's ready. Mitch Trubisky about 4 or 5 years ago was put onto the field because Mike Glennon was doing so bad. It wasn't because Mitch was ready. It was because the Bears were sick of losing. Accept the fact that you may not have the best season this year under Andy Dalton. You may not have a winning year this year if Justin Fields is not ready and Andy Dalton is in. Allow yourself to understand that you can have many good years to come if you let Justin Fields develop. The entire scenario that I just described is basically under the impression that Fields will not be ready come week 1 for the starting role. He is ready, and he is truly outperforming Andy Dalton. Don't hold him back. Waste his rookie contract. Let him loose. I'm saying to the Chicago Bears, if they're somehow seeing this, which they probably aren't, mostly to answer the question, that if he's ready, he is put out there, correct time, he will do great things. Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney. They just got Bird as well from the New England Patriots. This team has a lot of potential. David Montgomery out of the backfield had his first 1,000-yard season in just his second year with the Bears. Potential there. Don't pull the trigger early on Fields, otherwise we will have a Trubisky 2.0 on our hands. That's all I have to say about that one. Smith has the next question, and it's actually about the NBA. And his question is, who do I think the last 2 teams will be? Representing the East and the West. Now, the East, I feel like it's pretty clear-cut. A lot going on right now, but I'm telling you right now, as much as I hate James Harden, he's on a team that has way too much star power. Way too much star power. You have James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Joe Harris, Blake Griffin. Are you kidding me? So much. think they're going to overpower everyone. Until the 76ers can make a deep playoff run, I still don't believe in them. I don't care if they're at the top of the East right now. When it comes to the playoffs, they don't have the guy who can knock the shot down. I understand they're very deep with Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Marcus Thibault. It's a very talented team. Do not get me wrong. I still can't trust a single player on that team to take that last shot. I knocked them last year and knocked me with them last year in the fact that they just don't have that guy with the ice in his veins at the end of the game, and I still think they don't have him. The Nets, they have so many people. Joe Harris is a sharpshooter. Blake Griffin finessed the Pistons, and now he's back looking like he did 3 or 4 years ago where he was putting up 25 a game. He's just not getting the minutes because his team is so loaded and he's a little older. We've seen what James Harden can do with his step back, and he is actually improving on the defensive end. Ended a series last year with a steal. Block, I believe. For those trying to say James Harden can no longer defend, stop it, because that's not true. What Kevin Durant can do on the scoring end, we don't even have to talk about Kyrie Irving's handles because everyone in the basketball community understands his ability to take over a game. The team's too loaded. I want them to go far? No. I don't like what the Nets did. I don't like that they basically a melting pot of different players from different teams on their team and just made a dream team and put Harden on there after all that he pouted for. I think Harden should have stayed in Houston and dealt with the situation. Not ignorant to the fact that this team is so powerful. I don't think anyone in the East is going to take them down. The same with the Bucks. They have Drew Holiday. Good for them. He's miles better than Eric Bledsoe from last year. Still can't trust anyone on that team to take the last shot. Giannis is slowly developing his three-point shot. Chris Middleton is a sharpshooter, but not at the end of the game. Not when someone's pressing up on him. Not when there's a hand in his face. He has to beat the buzzer. Lopez is solid inside, but I can say the same for him. They just need that person with ice in their veins, and unfortunately, I think the Nets stole everyone who fits that category. If we look in the West, loaded. We have the Suns, we have the Mavs, we have the Lakers who are, trying to get their way up there. We have the Jazz who have dominated the top of the West for the majority of the year. Them and the Suns have been going back and forth. I tell you, I got to go with the Suns. I can't go up against Chris Paul. Chris Paul went to the Oklahoma City Thunder last year. Were projected win, I believe it was like 20-something games out of an 82-game season. We're considered a team that was supposed to be bottom of the barrel. Give them a 4 or 5 seed. Nuts. This Suns team did the same. He helped them get the same jump, but they started out higher. They were 1 game off of making the playoffs last year in the bubble. Went 8-0 in the bubble and almost got in. Steve Williams is a phenomenal coach, so I'm going to give him some credit as well. He's really picked this team up over the course of the last couple of years that he's been employed there. Paul took them, a fringe playoff team in the West that has been way better, miles better than the East for years, and made them the number 1 team. Up the Lakers when they were at full strength, and the Lakers, I don't think are going to be at full strength for the rest of the year. AD and LeBron are continuing to fight injuries, but they have to play, otherwise they're going to be forced into an odd play-in situation. The Mavs still have some development to go. The Jazz have not made a deep run yet, but the Suns have so much experience on that team just by plugging Chris Paul in with a bunch of receptive young people. Listen, Chris Paul, the Rockets a couple years ago, or a few years ago now, and he was there for a while. The talent was there. So was arrogance. No one was going to listen to him and let him take that team over. That's why they didn't do well. Then he went to the Thunder. Players were there. Everyone was listening. But they were all 22 years old, 21 years old, 20 years old. Right out of college. Talent wasn't there. But they were receptive. And were still able to be 4th or 5th. He has both. He has Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton. He has a loaded team. They're allowing him to take them under his wing. I think they're going to go far. I think they're going to be representing the West. There's too much going on with other teams. I don't trust the Jazz to go deep. The Mavs are still developing. I'm leaving some people out, but the Lakers and the Clippers are doing phenomenal, but I can say the same thing there in that I and Paul George don't seem to be meshing extremely well. They're beating up on the Lakers, but the Lakers have been battling injury throughout the entire year. And when it comes down to it, I don't see the Clippers going up against the Suns and taking Chris Paul and that team down. They're too quick, too efficient in scoring, and they're too good at getting the ball to whoever's open and going through the rotations in comparison to anyone else in the league right now. Who I think is going to win between the Suns and the Nets, I can't tell you yet. I'll have to get back to everyone on that. I'm honestly not too sure. But phenomenal question, Chris. I really had to think on that one, that's for sure. Thank you for giving me that thought-provoking question. Last question is from Cory Sparks. Should Amir Garrett be disciplined for his antics? So, he did get suspended 5 games for his antics against the Chicago Cubs a couple weeks ago, where he started cussing at Anthony Rizzo, who did not say anything. They've just had bad blood for years. For those of you who are not sure who Amir Garrett is, he is a reliever, pitcher, out of the bullpen for the Cincinnati Reds. He has this tendency. I mean, he's a super athletic guy, super big, super buff. Pretty good pitcher for the most part. He's had his inconsistencies this year, which may be why he's had these antics. It could be out of frustration for all I know. He basically does this thing after he strikes out players, especially in his division and especially on the Chicago Cubs, where he will start swearing at them so much. He'll point at them, he'll yell at the bullpen, he'll jump up and down like a loon. I mean, he's just nuts. The adrenaline must be up there. That's all I have to say. And he hasn't really been disciplined for it much. Well, he ended up cussing at Rizzo. Was a whole bench brawl, and the MLB ended up suspending him 5 games. If he continues to shout at other players and like point other players out and say derogatory things to them, I can't talk today. I think that he should get a longer suspension than the 5 games. I think it should double each time, go up to 10, then 20, then 40, then 80, and then a whole season. If he is just celebrating, there's no issue with celebrating. I mean, we've heard about the bat flipping conversation, I guess, if you will, with Fernando Tatis, where he flips the bat right after he homers off Trevor Bauer. And Trevor Bauer said it great himself. People celebrate. You know, they made it to the MLB. They put in the work, done the studying. They have reached a physical point in their lives where they can excel at a very high level, at the highest level there could be at that sport. Let them celebrate. You're pointing at guys and trying to provoke something. That's a little bit different, and I think it is fair for Amir Garrett to get suspended. I don't like fines because if you fine someone their salary for the whole year, which I'm not even sure I'm not even sure you have the ability to do that. I don't really understand the logistics with, when you suspend someone, how much do they get any pay or that type of thing. I'm assuming they don't. It doesn't matter if you fine them on their salary because they probably have brand deals with other people. They're MLB players. They have sponsors. They're going to make money back. They have their money in investments. Their money is making money for them at this point. It's too late for you to MLB teach them a lesson financially. So I like suspensions. I think they should continue to be doubled because that's the only way it's really going to hit home to someone who is being derogatory towards other players. When you are continuously starting a fight with, especially the same team, he has something with the Cubs. I don't know what it is. Then I think you should be penalized for sure. That's actually all the questions I have addressed. We tackled 5 of them today, as well as some general sports updates. This was a lot of fun, and I'll probably do a similar idea to this with another person on here as a co-host in the future, just addressing a lot of your questions that have accumulated over the past couple of weeks. Responding to everything going on in the sports world. Thank you so much for watching. If you've gotten to this point, make sure you subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Follow us on Spotify and all of our other social media platforms as well. And look out for some really fun collaborations between All Sports Now and Notion Gaming as we merge ourselves into the esports world. That's all I have for you right here, and we will see you next time on All Sports Now.
So I think it's time we say goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye. What's the point to all of this?